Alright, welcome back to the channel. Okay, I'm gonna try to get this finished up real quick. It's actually not gonna be real quick, so let's just hunker down and get through it. This is still chapter 58 of the Holy Megillah Nasarean Bible of the Essene Way. This is Yahshua's description of his own diet. And I skipped a whole lot of this because for time purposes, but you still might want to watch the first video. I'm going to try to read just a little bit of what I skipped because there's so many things that Yahshua talks about in many parts in these chapters. So I can't bring it all without doing what I can do. So here we go. This is a little bit of what I skipped from the first video. He explaining his own personal diet. When doing more writing, studying, and intense concentration, mental exercise, I find that I choose foods and herbs that enhance that sort of exercise, such as a bit more fruit for my hard-working brain. My and your dietary needs also change according to the season and the daily weather. For example, in the season of spring, I often do a cleanse. I might eat more cleansing foods and less building foods in spring than in other seasons. On a particularly hot summer day, it might be appropriate to eat more juicy fruits than on a cooler day. In the fall, with all the abundance of freshly harvested foods, I am likely to find myself feasting with friends more often than in the winter. In the winter, I eat more stored foods like cooked grains than when fresh vegetables are more abundant. Now, speaking about typical days, at this stage in my life, I can say this about my typical daily diet. I typically have one meal that features fruit per day. Typically, that fruit meal is my first food of the day, eaten in the late morning because I do my hatha yoga upon awakening, then go for a walk prior to eating any food. This first meal might be either entirely of fruit or might simply feature fruit. Now that I am a married man, I often join Miriam in having a breakfast that consists of cooked cereal grain topped with fruit, preferably a handful of berries. Personally, I digest fruit fine with the cooked cereal grain, but some of you might find that you need to eat fruit only by itself to avoid gas. I again tell you, we are each unique in our ability to digest various foods and combinations. Other than as a topping for a hot cereal grain, I typically do not mix fruit with other foods unless I had grain cereal with my fruit at breakfast. I typically have a cooked grain with or as my midday meal, my second meal of the day, often with raw greens or vegetable soup or raw or cooked vegetables or some combination of these foods. I include a pinch of salt and a little olive oil in my soup or with other cooked vegetables and grains. Typically, my third meal is in the evening around sunset and features a large salad of fresh raw herbage with building foods like fermented dairy or eggs or nuts. I personally choose to eat unfertilized eggs. Those eggs were not going to become baby chickens. Some Edenites keep a few hens separated from a rooster for a time so as to have unfertilized eggs. This is not for health reasons, but an ethical choice. I call this third meal sunset meal. However, I emphasize that this meal is around the time of sunset, not necessarily exactly at sunset. Typically, at exact sunset or shortly before, I perform my last solar contemplation of the day. Typically, I face the sun and simply send in my appreciation for all it does, and also acknowledge the cherubim of the seventh heaven for their good works. This act is not instead of my evening service. I perform evening service immediately prior to bed along with hatha yoga. All right, and then I want to read this part. I also skipped, but this is his breakdown of the building diet, the maintenance diet, and the cleansing diet. That's why you got to get the book, because it goes into detail in what all these are. I have described building foods, eggs and dairy, along with nuts and seeds. I have made clear that when I work hard, I eat more building foods. That is a building diet. It builds strong muscles. My typical diet is my maintenance diet and includes a moderate amount of both building foods and cleansing foods. I occasionally switch to a short-term cleansing diet, in which case I typically abstain from or eat less of the building foods, especially nuts and cheese. Yogurt is easier to digest than nuts or cheese and so can be eaten on a longer cleanse. But on the short-term cleanse, I typically abstain from all animal products and nuts, as well as grains and most seeds, except for those used because they have a cleansing property. On the cleansing diet, I eat more raw vegetables and fruits and drink the sort of cleansing teas and other cleansing foods that Miriam recently spoke about here at Mount Carmel. Of the building diet, maintenance diet, and cleansing diet, my typical diet is the maintenance diet because that is the diet I am on for most of any typical year. All right, now I'm going to skip down to the 7 precepts of Yesod because, like I said, he does repeat some of the stuff that he already went over in his personal diet. He repeats them in these, what he calls, this is a less personalized language, and it's not centered on the topic of Yahshua's personal diet. So here we go. Yahshua said, compassionate vegetarianism is the foundation, Yesod, of the spiritual life. When the primary motive of a person for being vegetarian is compassionate kindness towards animals, that dietary practice becomes an act of merciful love, a spiritual practice. Merciful love is the keystone of Yesod, the heartstone of spiritual yoga practice. The first precept of Yesod does not mean that improved health is not also a good reason for vegetarianism. Rather, it means that compassionate kindness towards animals is the primary motive, the most important reason among many good reasons for the form of vegetarianism that I call Yesod. The second precept of Yesod, Yahshua said, what are the kashurat, permitted foods in Yesod? Read the 10 Commandments of Moses, the Nasarean version, found in the HOLY Megillah Nasarean Bible of the Essene WAY, and you will have your answer. That answer is vegetarian foods, including, if you wish, dairy and eggs. Fish and fowl are not permitted because clearly they are types of meat, being animals. I know a man that argues that fish are sea vegetables. I do not agree. Look a fish in the eye and tell me that. The assembly laughed. The third precept of Yesod, holistic nutrition that feeds all 4 bodies of the human being, illustrated by the Essene pyramid, is a key feature of Yesod. Yahshua said, receive now a key axiom of Yesod. Attention to the nutritional needs of each of the 4 bodies of the human being is what differentiates Yesod from other forms of vegetarianism. Yesod intentionally nourishes all 4 levels of the Essene pyramid, our 4 bodies, and thus I call it nutrition for the whole human being. The 4 levels, 4 bodies of the human being are symbolized by an illustration called the Essene pyramid that I will now share with you. Here it is. He's going to break it down. I wish I could keep it up while I read it, but I don't know how to do that side by side. This is the Essene pyramid. Take a look at the 4 bodies: physical body, emotional body, mental body, and spiritual body. Yahshua pointed to a drawing of the Essene pyramid. It was of 4 levels. Yahshua said the 4 levels represented in the Essene pyramid are as follows. The bottom level at the base of the pyramid represents the physical body. The second level up from the bottom of the pyramid is labeled the feeling body. The third section up from the bottom is the thinking body. The fourth section, the top level of the pyramid, is the level of soul and thus is labeled the spiritual body. Each level can be further divided, and each body is an aspect of one whole human being. Each of the 4 levels of the human being are provided nourishment in my dietary practice called Yesod. Yahshua said, the top section of the 4th level of the Essene pyramid, like the drawing as a whole, is a triangle. The top point of that top triangle symbolizes Yah becoming immanent in creation in the form of an individualized unit, monad, point of I am, Yah, a soul, created in the image and likeness of the Holy Trinity, which is the first triangle, the realm of unmanifested spirit, from which point emerges the still zero of Yah transcendent that has no form and yet is the source of all form. That point, the top point of the Essene pyramid, is the point of interface between the still zero domain and unmanifested spiritual being, and the domain of physical manifestation, the realm of numbers and spins, and thus is the door between domains. The soul body has its own crown point, the spirit, that you are and I am. Yah, unmanifested, begins the eternally repeating process of manifestation from still center within into the domain of manifestation by affirming Yah, I am. Affirming Yah is the first step of Yah, the first step towards manifestation as a soul, spirit, and individual being. Yah is the spirit person at the crown chakra of both the human being and the Essene pyramid. That Yah reminds me of when they be chopping them boards and they be like, hi-ya, right? You find out they tapping into this source. Yah is the spirit person at the crown chakra of both the human being and the Essene pyramid. The top triangle of the pyramid is called the spiritual body or the soul body. The top point being embodied by the two base points at the top triangle of the pyramid. Those two base points of the top triangle, that is the top level of the pyramid, illustrated as Shemesh and Shemaiah. See them right there? Shemesh and Shemaiah forming this top pyramid. They are the masculine and feminine principles. The blank space on the page above the top point of our illustration of the Essene pyramid surrounds the entire drawing and represents the unmanifested potential which I am expands as the self-replicating trinity of manifested being. The Essene pyramid is a very simple illustration of four primary interpenetrating sheets of bodies of Yah, I am. The four sheets interact and interface with one another and thus affect one another, and each sheet is interpenetrated by all seven primary chakras, through which various forms of nutrition flow into the sheets. Yesod, my dietary practice, intentionally provides nourishment to the holistic human being, and thus I call it holistic nutrition. It is rather obvious that eating a healthy vegetarian diet supplies nutrition to the physical body. Less obvious is the fact that it also provides spiritual nourishment to the spiritual body, the soul, by being, if the primary motive is merciful love, a daily act of merciful compassion that feeds the soul. For a human to abstain from eating animal flesh for a compassionate reason is an act of divine love. The mystery of divine love is that the more you give it or feed it to others, the more you are spiritually fed yourself. Likewise, other acts of kindness, even kind thoughts and prayers for the well-being of others, feed the soul. Many of those compassionate acts also feed the emotional body. A beautiful sunset can also feed the emotional body, as can words of love and appreciation from or for others. That very same sunset that feeds the emotional body also provides via sunlight unseen nourishment for the physical body. Although most are not aware of it, an unseen property within sunlight also feeds the spiritual body of the soul. Lo, it should be widely known that appropriate, not excessive, sunbathing is one of the greatest holistic wellness acts that one can self-administer. It provides nutrition for all four bodies, represented by the four levels of the Essene pyramid. Not only does sunlight heal many ills, it makes the healthy more healthy, the happy more happy. Sunlight is the fire of life that we receive from the living sphere of light, the sun, that is centered in the supernal light of Yah. I advise you to feed on sunlight by sunbathing on a nearly daily basis. By the term nearly daily, I mean most days unless weather or circumstances dictate otherwise. Even so, even on most cloudy days, we can find a moment or two to be directly touched by sunlight, or at least sense it through the clouds. Do not burn your skin in overzealous sunbathing. Be prudent. Yea, be prudent, but also be aware of the great holistic nutritional benefits of sunlight to all four levels of the Essene pyramid. It is safe, thus best, to do that sunbathing in the morning, Late morning is okay, or late afternoon, not in the hottest part of the day. But if you sometimes sunbathe in the hotter part of the day, the key then is to have your exposure be brief so as not to burn. There are many sources of nourishment for each of the four bodies of the whole human being, many unknown and unexpected. Sunlight is but one example to get you thinking about less than obvious sources of nutrition. Yesod includes the use of subtle foods such as air, sunlight, beauty, love, joy, forgiveness, and more. The practitioner of Yesod will come to know that even gazing at stars in the night is a form of nutrition. Yea, even your eyes can eat. All of the branches and roots of the tree of life are sources of nourishment. The communions and sounds of power are forms of nourishment. Wherefore know this, one that practices Yesod will make it an ongoing study to become aware of the various kinds of nourishment available for the four bodies represented in the Essene pyramid. All of these things are studied within Essene Mystery Mountain of Peace, our mystery school. Okay, we're at the fourth precept of Yesod, building diet, maintenance diet, and cleansing diet. One more video on the diet and we'll be done, guys. Thanks for watching. Well, we won't be done because I skipped a lot of stuff. You guys got to get this book so you can read all of it. All right. Stay tuned.
To God, he's so minute, played out, obsolete, past tense, weak in a week. He need not speak ever in the presence of the Almighty. Better hold your tongue, trust he only through the Son reclaim his face in the kingdom. Live heaven sent, repent, let go vent.
Everybody come on in.